So on Friday night, I went to see Ballerina from the world of John Wick. Although I was quite surprised that this would have been the next John Wick thing to come out instead of the blind man and the Japanese daughter actually coming to fight like they did in the post-credit scene of John Wick 4. However, this film, whilst I was hyped with all the trailers when it dropped, I was quite surprised with it all. And it makes me want to see Eve Macaro in more movies for John Wick. I'm actually quite surprised. Not only that, but I was a little bit more surprised to see that despite me and my brother, there was only like 5 different people in the cinema with us, and it was strange because it was the day it came out. However, I can safely say that Ballerina is a perfect spin-off to a John Wick franchise. And with that, I just want to warn that there's going to be possible spoilers in this review for John Wick 3 and John Wick 4, along with Ballerina. To understand where I'm coming from with this review, you have to watch these movies to understand, because this spin-off, as shown with the trailers, is set during the events of John Wick 3. But that being said, let's get on with this review. So I'm going to do something a little different here. I'm going to talk about the negatives first, because I've got very little negatives to say about it. So I'm going to just get them out of the way. And I can say that a negative for this review is that the timeline for this is a little bit jumbled up. What I mean by that is that it says clearly it's set between John Wick 3 and 4, but there's stuff that happens in John Wick 3 and 4 that kind of makes no sense with the story going on here. For example, in John Wick 3, John Wick goes to Passage, and for the consequence of him doing so, he gets shut out from his family, only for during the 4th one to go back to the family so he can do the high table duel. And it's very established that the leader of that family was dead during John Wick 4. However, when it comes to the fact that the guy phones up and says that one of your members needs to be taken care of, the first person that leader calls is John Wick, which makes no sense because he's been shut off from that family. So they wouldn't be on good terms. I was paying really close attention in the cinema whenever John Wick was fighting in the place that they were fighting in the snow, because I wanted to double check that his finger was cut off, because that's one of the key things I wanted to keep an eye on, to see if his finger was cut off. And when he actually got on the phone, you could see that his finger's gone. So obviously it takes place after that situation that we talked about with the banishment, in case people were like, oh, but he wasn't banished yet. Clearly the opening shows him about to be banished. As well as the Continental Hotel was another one that kind of confused me a little bit more, because the Continental Hotel is no longer in use and it blows up in John Wick 4. But at the end of this movie, Eve Macaro signs in at that Continental, and you could say, oh well, it could take place after they've rebuilt it or whatever. But Lance Reddick's character, unfortunately, he's dead in the movie, the receptionist. So it can't make no sense because he's the one who signs her in. So pretty much there's a bit of a timeline issue with this movie. But despite the flaws of the timeline, this is a really great spin-off. And for that reason, I really enjoyed it. And like the origin story of how the dad was a member of that family, he dies from these like rogue, like the hunters kind of tribe. They call them a cult in this movie. To see that Ian McShane's character, Winston, takes her into the same family her dad was in. And it just shows the training of her growing up to become what she is now. And it kind of makes you wonder if this was the same training, despite the ballerina dances, of course. Was this the same like fight sequence and training that John Wick had to do before he did his impossible task, before he became the Baba Yaga? That was an interesting thing to see. Norman Reedus was a bit of a shocker because he looked like he was gonna die in this movie, and he comes back like last minute in like the ending sequence. So I was very surprised with that. I thought he was dead when they showed it on screen. I like the bit where they fight in the other Continental, and Eve McCarrow and these two other guys are being put on the death row for obviously breaking the rules. But it turns out in a shocking twist that Eve says, "Oh no, actually, I just hurt them. I didn't kill anyone." And then the guy lets her go and kills everyone next to her. That was a badass scene to show. Yeah, it was just something cool because obviously we saw that in John Wick 1 when the girl killed someone in the hotel. And this was like a different take on that. I like the place where they go to in the snow. It's like Winston says to Eve, it's a cult. And you see this moment where Eve nearly runs over a kid and she's very apologetic, but the kid's pointing finger guns at her. And then you've got stuff like the barista at the like coffee shop being an assassin as well. And you just see how like brainwashed into a cult this city is. This little like village in the snow. And the plate fight was cool. The grenade fight scene was crazy, but I think the one that tops it off for me is the flamethrower fight. I loved that flamethrower fight. I think it's one of the best scenes in the movie, along with when John Wick's on screen. And they've obviously ended it to a point where they've teased a sequel, because a major spoiler here, I know I've spoiled a lot of it here, but a major spoiler of it is that at the end she gets a bounty on her and she just walks out this like theatre and it just cuts to black and it's credits. And they're definitely trying to tease a sequel with that, and I'll be all for it because despite its timeline flaws in the placement, I still think that Ballerina is a really great spin-off. To see a new character in the John Wick world was a welcoming fresh air to me, in my opinion. And I really recommend this movie if you are a John Wick fan, especially with the fight choreography and intense action. You will definitely not be disappointed. But other than that, I hope that you enjoyed this review for Ballerina. I'm really hoping this movie gets a sequel with anadearmas' character facing the challenges of how it ends with the bounty, of course. Since it was set up really well for like a little tease of a possible return, like I've said, more animations are coming to the channel. I might actually end up doing a John Wick animation at some point. That would be cool. Get Blue Kitten cosplay to play Eve. Maybe that would be cool. The shelf has got nothing on it because I don't really have any John Wick like stuff to put on display. I couldn't find anything. I know there's that Call of Duty skin of Eve's character, but I couldn't find anything like merch for this movie, so yeah, sorry about that. I know the Lego Batman stuff isn't doing well on the channel recently because these are just filler episodes, but don't worry, I'm also working on other projects. Like I said, I might do a John Wick one. But other than that, I hope you enjoyed this video and I will see you later, and bye bye.